Hey, Sassy Stuff, what's up? My name is Molly, and we are with a new face this week. Welcome to the team, to Sassy Stuff, Miss Sierra. We're so excited to have her on. She is going to be here guiding us through some very special episodes this week, like a Florida and Arkansas episode. Sierra, tell us a little bit about your background and all of the cool stuff about you.
Yes, so I went to Florida. As you can see, I have the Gator tag behind me. Went to Florida, covered the Gators in local news, and then moved to Arkansas, where I'm at now, and covered the Razorbacks for a few years. And yeah, they're just two very interesting fan bases. And I'm excited to be here and talk about all things SEC football.
Yay. Okay, well, we'll just hop right in. Tell me, how are you feeling as a Florida Gator about this upcoming football season with where they're ranked currently?
Yeah, so last season definitely ended on a high note, winning games against Ole Miss, against LSU, of course, even though FSU was kind of crappy last year. They beat them, which is always a plus. And what was so great is we got to see the young talent emerge. DJ Lagway, the quarterback, of course, he took over when Graham Mertz, the previous quarterback, unfortunately went down in the Tennessee game, and Florida really stuck it to Tennessee. They didn't get the win in Knoxville, but it showed a lot of promise. And after the season ended, a lot of Gator fans, I saw comments on DJ Lagway's page. They were saying, DJ, you've made me love Gator football again. And that's just so great to see that. And also just with Florida's schedule, it makes me a little bit more comfortable knowing that, okay, we have a good quarterback. And Coach Billy Napier, of course, last year, on a hot seat. He lost games at Texas A&M, Miami, in bad ways, but they found a way to come back from it, and I think that's really promising for Gator fans for sure. And also, there were reports that Lagway was offered X amount of dollars to go to other schools, especially in this world we're in, where it's transfer portal galore. And he stayed at Florida, and he was a big part of the reason I think why Billy Napier is still the head coach, because those two had such a great connection. And after the Texas game where Florida lost bad, Lagway was hurt. Florida's athletic director, Scott Strickland, was like, hey, Billy Napier is going to be our head coach next year. And people were not happy. But then that was before Florida started to reemerge again. Lagway was healthy, and it showed so much promise for the future of this team.
Obviously you have DJ Lagway. We shouted him out the other day during the Texas episode. Georgia is a huge Lagway fan. I mean, that is her just, I think, all-time crush, her and Emma both. But behind DJ, you have a running back like Jaden Bow. You've got defensive standouts like Caleb Banks and Tyreek Sapp. So you really kind of have an A-list team this year. As a Texas fan, I think it's probably going to be one of the most entertaining games of the season. The top three for me this year are Ohio State, Georgia, and Florida. Am I biased? Do I think that Texas will beat Florida? Absolutely. What are your thoughts on the Texas Florida game? I feel like that's probably going to be one of your most difficult games this year.
Oh, that's one also that is circled on my list because it's in the swamp. Florida played there last year, and people are like, "Oh, well, how you feel about Texas?" Last year's game against Texas didn't really count because there was a third string walk-on quarterback who transferred from Yale. No disrespect to the Ivy League, we know they're all smarter than us, but football wise, the SEC is kind of where it's at. And so Florida didn't really get to throw Texas their best punch when they played them in Austin. And so this is going to kind of be more legit rematch, I think. And it's going to be hard to tell because now we finally get to see Arch Manning in a real game environment. He had some unique opportunities last year and whatnot, but he wasn't the starter. It was Quinn Ewers and all that. So I'm excited to see how those two go head to head and how I'm just excited in general. I know this is in the Texas episode, but I'm just excited to see how Arch Manning does throughout a real SEC full season. God willing, he's healthy.
I think anyone in the SEC, it doesn't matter if you're a Texas fan or not, is excited about this Manning boy being in play. And I think him against DJ Lagway is probably going to be one of my favorite matchups this year. Obviously, I'm excited to watch him in Ohio State and Georgia, but like you just said, this is kind of like a rematch in heaven for Florida, I think. And their season taking off is a little bit lighter, which is great for Florida. I feel like having a couple games to ease into it. Whereas I think Texas has a little bit more of a difficult ride. So Texas might be tired by the time they play Florida. We don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also, I mean, you guys are going to be competing against teams like LSU. I feel personally like, yes, last year's one was great. I think this year, though, I think you guys are just ranked so much higher, and I think you have so much more potential than LSU does this year. But that is listed as one of your toughest games this year. How are you feeling about that one as well?
Yeah, and that's our first road game, and it's under the lights, night game. We know how scary it can be in Baton Rouge in the Death Valley. And it's going to be Lagway's first SEC start on the road. And so that a little bit makes me nervous, but I think he's ready for it. It is still fairly early in the season because Florida starts off with LIU, Brooklyn, LIU, Long Island University, and then USF, University of South Florida. And, those are great warm up games, but LSU is like, oh, put your big boy pants on. We're in the SEC, buddy. And so we know Lagway can handle that kind of pressure. I know he can, especially in that Ole Miss game to close out this SEC season last year where Florida shocked the Rebels and pretty much knocked them out of the college football playoff. And that shows like, okay, he can come. He's very composed in those high pressure situations. And I think, playing in the swamp, Lagway is from the Houston area, I believe. So he's used to that humidity in September. That part probably won't really scare him. I really do have faith in this team to see how they do
Yeah.
against LSU. That's going to be a real fun one.
Yeah, I feel like the top three games that on three college game day, what they're all saying for Florida, top three hardest games are going to be Georgia, Texas, and LSU. I am. I get that LSU is a great team. I don't quite see that being such a competitive game. I know it is like boots on the ground, our first road game. We're in the SEC, all of those things. But I just think when we're looking at the roster and we're looking at the actual talent of the team, I think watching Georgia, Texas, Florida, those are going to be the most difficult, engaging, and fun for fans to be watching for sure. I don't know how you feel about your coaching staff going up against, we talk about this a lot with Georgia, going up against a coaching staff like Kirby Smart. I mean, Kirby Smart's a great coach. And I think, as much as a Texas fan, I want to say he's not. He is. And I do think Georgia quoted this the other day in our Texas episode that he can outcoach most of the SEC coaches any day. How are you feeling as going up against a coach like Kirby Smart as a Florida fan?
Yeah, like you said, Kirby Smart, I think, can outcoach a lot of people. And Billy Napier didn't always make the best coaching decisions sometimes last year. But Florida Georgia is another one of those games where anything can really happen. And I'm kind of thankful that Georgia is always played in Jacksonville. Some people are like, oh no, we need to go to home and we need to go to the school sites. But I think it's great to have a neutral site and where all of the fans can go. And I feel like it a lot of times leans Florida because it's less than 2 hours away from UF's campus. But going back to that question, yeah, Georgia, they won the SEC championship. Like, you can't deny that. Yes, Carson Beck is gone, but Georgia's always next man up. And so I think that that'll be an interesting game for sure because Florida played pretty close to Georgia last year at the cocktail party, but Lagway got hurt. He hurt his hamstring in that game. So it's going to be another kind of like second opportunity for this Gator team to beat these teams that beat them last year.
How are you feeling about the out of conference games? Obviously, being in the SEC is the most competitive football conference, in my opinion. And yes, I'm a little biased about that, but I do believe that. I genuinely believe that the SEC has the majority of the best talent. And I think everybody else knows that because look at the transfer portal. How many kids are trying to transfer into the SEC every year from other conferences, including the Big Ten? And I know the Big Ten people are going to come for us when I just said
the Big 30, right?
Basically. So, how are you feeling? You've got some out of, you guys are going to be playing Carson back again because he's at Miami now. So, well, how are you feeling about these out of conference games? I know, like I said, this conference is the best, but
yeah. Well, we'll start with USF and South Florida, which doesn't make any sense because they're not located in South Florida. They're located in Tampa. That's my Central Florida bias speaking. But anyways, USF, to be honest, not really sure how they are this year, but it's for that team, they're not really considered a rival, but it's a team that you should always beat. But they came close to beating Florida a few years ago. And a reason for that is because they're the roster, how crazy this transfer portal is, it's really interesting to see like anybody can beat you these days because those mid-major programs or non-power four schools like University of South Florida, there's guys from that went to SEC schools that are on that roster that transfer because they want to get better playing time. And you just never know who's going to come out that night. And so USF is, I think, a game just to show like, hey, like it might highlight your mistakes, but not really anything to worry about. As for Miami, Miami is considered Florida's rival, I would say, like in the early 2000s, 90s, when the U was like, all about the U and like all of the craziness that happened there in Florida. And Miami would really go at it because they played so often. But Florida doesn't play Miami that much as anymore. They played last year and they played this year. I'm not sure when they're going to play again. But it's an interesting rivalry there because a lot of Florida's guys are from the South Florida area. So when I say South Florida, not USF, but like South Florida, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, that whole part of the state, the southeast part of the state. And that's a huge recruiting hotbed. Lots of talented athletes, like even have gone to the NFL. You could just look up the city of Miami of how many NFL players are from that area. But anyways, and so that's a recruiting area that some of these coaches fight over. Last year when Miami beat the crap out of Florida, they had, of course, Cam Ward as their quarterback then. And Miami beat Florida in the swamp. And after the game, when Florida lost, the Miami players came to the recruiting bench and were like, come to the U, come to the U. And so that was something like Florida fans were like, whoa, like this, we cannot let this happen. So that's going to be an interesting one, especially this one is at Miami this year, which is interesting because if you watch Alex Earl's TikToks when she was at the University of Miami as a student, she would always, film herself partying, but tailgating and whatnot, but it's never near the stadium. It's always on campus at some frat house because Miami's stadium is about 30, 45 minutes away from the school. So it doesn't have a huge student presence. So at the games, because it's so far. And so I think Florida could definitely use that to their benefit, that it's at the Miami Dolphins Stadium. There's tons of Gator fans, alumni that live in South Florida. And I would imagine I would not be shocked if Gator fans outnumbered Miami fans at that game. And of course, we get to see Carson Beck again. That's going to be really interesting to see how he does at Miami, considering his Lamborghini got stolen and his girlfriend broke up with him. Like it's been kind of a rough start.
Yeah, I'm sure he's not lonely in Miami, for being honest. I used to live there, so I'm sure he's doing just fine. But I am excited to see how he plays for Miami. Obviously, he's a great quarterback. He kind of ended the year last year a little injured.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see how he's come back from being injured. And I think the U is such a fun school, and when you look at the demographic of the U, it's obviously a very wealthy school, and so they kind of have like the best tailgates and like the best parties and the best everything. So I think it's a good, even though yes, it's so far. I actually used to live close to where the Dolphins played, and so
Okay.
it is so far. Like especially with traffic, it's a trek to get up there. So more power to the students that are actually making it there. But such a fun just environment overall, and I think that just has such an energy filled game just in general. And I love seeing a Florida matchup. Like I love seeing it. I think the Florida people are people of their own kind, and I love seeing them against each other.
Yes, and also to piggyback off that, you mentioned Florida State, and we know that Florida State had a terrible season, won like 3 games, and it's going to be interesting to see how they come back. They believe their quarterback is the transfer from Boston College, and they had DJU that did not work out at Florida State, and it's really interesting to see. But that's a game that Florida, regardless of how bad they were last year, it's like it's Florida State. We recruit the same players. A lot of Florida's athletes were considering Florida State or probably had them in their top 3. And so there's a lot of, I wouldn't say trash talk that goes on between the players, but definitely amongst the fans. My opinion, as a Florida alum and someone who grew up in the state, I think Florida State is our biggest rival, simply because of the proximity. They're 2 hours apart. And growing up as a kid, people were like, "Oh, who's your favorite team, Florida or Florida State?" Like there was really nobody else, especially growing up in Central Florida. UCF wasn't what it is now, and Miami was a little bit too far for us. So a lot of it's just like the trash talk, an academic standpoint, like, oh, who got into Florida, who got into Florida State, and so there's a lot of trash talk that happens leading up to that game. But regardless, Florida State is a game you have to win. But it's an awesome rivalry in every sport, which I really love about Florida State. Is it seems like every single sport is competitive. Like when they play them in basketball or baseball, it's very heated, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think just like Florida, you just can't beat it. I mean, the rivalry there is just so fun, and I love smack talk. I love it. I eat it up because I think I like watching people eat their words when someone does win. So that's like,
The guy, the Florida State fan that said, crap, who is it? Was it Memphis, the team? He was like, if we lose to Memphis, like I'll eat dog poop or something like that. Or if we lose to Memphis, I'll eat dog poop. And they lost to Memphis, and I don't know if he ate the dog poop, but Florida State seemed to be cursed for the rest of the year.
I'm from Texas, and there's been some stupid like bets over the years that like even like there was a Cowboys fan at one point who was like, "I'll shave my head if we lose," and I was like, as a Cowboys fan, that's a bet. And she had to shave her head, so it was
That was
terrible.
a girl. Oh
Yeah,
god.
it was a girl. Yeah, she was a woman, and she thought she knew that the Cowboys were going to do well. And I think when you're placing money or your hair on the Cowboys, you should probably think otherwise.
Yes.
Just especially because they're the Cowboys.
Yeah.
I think, I love watching the rivalries because I like watching people eat their words. I think, though, Florida has so much momentum coming off of last season that I think they're going to be the team to watch this year. And especially if they're able to upset either Texas or Georgia, I think this team has, they're a huge SEC contender and definitely a playoff contender.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking forward to watching them ride that wave of momentum coming into it. And plus, DJ Lagway is healthy, as we know. So there's really no telling where this team is going to go.
Yeah, and it's really exciting. I know Florida does have that tough schedule. It was a bit of a rough stretch, So they open up with LSU, then at Miami, then Texas at home, at Texas A&M, home against Mississippi State, then Georgia, at Kentucky, which Kentucky's an interesting one because Kentucky's had Florida's numbers for a few years now. They beat them last year, but it's just like really Kentucky. Kentucky's not supposed to be that great this year, and then Ole Miss at Ole Miss. So those are that, and then of course home against Tennessee. So there's that stretch. It's just like whew, back to back to back.
I think Florida has the talent. Are they going to be able to have the coaching staff to keep up with Steve Sarkisian, Kirby Smart? You've got some really big names out there. So we'll just have to see. But I think those two games are going to be their biggest games of the year for sure.
Yeah, I think those two. And, Billy Napier was a bit on the hot seat last year. And even though athletic director Scott Strickland was like, hey, we're keeping Billy Napier next year, but it's like, okay, but like still, what about this year? It's a new year. Like you gotta really get the job done, especially in a school like Florida in a conference like the SEC.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, it should be an exciting season for the Florida Gators. They open up the season against LAU. But thank you guys so much for hopping on here and listening to us talk about some Gator football. We'll see you next time.